Please welcome to the stage Kaela Moore.
Like she said, my name is Kaela, and I'm a writer, and I am a little bit obsessed with the truth. I like finding the truth in fiction, in nonfiction, in people, in the world, and in myself especially. And in my search for truth, something that I come across very often is silence. And silence is interesting to me because when we speak, we encode meaning into our words, but we also code meaning into silence. And I want to talk to you tonight not about good silence, like meditation or that moment after you go to bed and the kids are quiet, but silence that fosters dishonesty, that keeps us from telling the truth about the things that matter to us. Especially as a form of abuse, like silencing. Silencing just means to make silent or to curtail the expression of. And this is something that other people can do to you or that you can do to yourself. And silencing, unlike other forms of domestic violence and abuse, that doesn't often show up on police reports. So it's something that's less visible, that you don't often see. It comes in a lot of forms, like isolation, just cutting people off from the world, or gaslighting, which is psychological manipulation, invalidation, you don't deserve to feel that way, you don't deserve to think that, blocking. It is important, I think, as we explore all kinds of abuse, to understand that silence does not indicate a lack of strength. It just means that this person who was a victim was pouring all of their strength into something else. I come from a long line of very strong women who were silent because they were pouring everything they had into raising their children or keeping their families together. Why are we talking about this? Well, obviously, I think it's important to talk about all kinds of abuse, but for me personally, I started working on starting a nonprofit with some friends of mine last year called We're All Her. And you can read my whole story on that website, but we focus on helping women heal from trauma through storytelling. And essentially what it comes down to for me is I just never learned how to use my voice. I didn't know what I wanted, I didn't know what I needed, and I grew up and I married someone with an addiction problem who was abusive and unfaithful. And I protected myself with a buttload of secrets and silence, as you can see by my awesome graphic. Nobody knew. My family didn't know. No one knew. I worked very hard at presenting this picture of the young, energetic person who had her whole life ahead of her. Oftentimes we think the opposite of silence is noise, but noise brings us attention, and we don't need attention. What we need is connection. And the only thing that brings connection is vulnerability. Now, this is what we want vulnerability to look like. I would love it if vulnerability looked like this. It was just a straight line. Everything was great. But unfortunately, vulnerability takes a lot more work than that. And because I am deeply scientific as a writer, I did make you a graphic. And this is often what vulnerability looks like. It is rife with self-doubt, with insecurity, with fear, with lack of confidence, fear of rejection or actual rejection, and we find ourselves just in the middle of what feels like a mess. But it is a lot better than being silent. And so if you feel like you have not learned how to use your voice, like many people, there are 4 things I want you to know. And the first one is that you have the space to figure out what you want to say. If you have suffered abuse or trauma, or you've just never figured out how to say, this is what I need and this is who I am, and tell the world the truth, I'm giving you permission to do that now. The second thing is that it's going to take some time, because you don't just automatically go from being built of secrets, like some dark lord in a dungeon somewhere, to telling everyone who you are and how you feel. And the third thing, this is the hardest one for most of us, it's the hardest for me, is it's going to be messy as hell. We have to embrace the fact that in a social media-driven world, we are going to have to put our real self forward, not our best self. We're going to have to learn how to tell the truth. And the last thing is, when you're in the middle of the self-doubt, on that very scientific graph that I built you, you can do it. There will be so many times when you take the chance of telling someone the truth about how you feel, about what you think, and you will be just drowning in self-doubt. But what we have to remember is that we're all a mess. In one way or another, we're all just on different levels of trying to get our shit together. And once we realize that, there's a whole bunch of freedom. We can actually talk about things, we can actually tell the truth, and realize that we're not alone. Because the false sense of confidence or the false sense of I know everything that we like to put forth to the world, it's not going to get us through. That's a really miserable way to live. There's one thought I want to leave you with, And it's just that we're too complicated and too beautiful to live a life that's clean and simple. So if you feel like you are not telling the truth about something, if you've suffered abuse or trauma or you're afraid or you're alone, please tell the truth. Thank you.